Hello, Ben here from Supercoach Insider. It's Saturday morning, and I'm trying to give you some final tips, some final help. At the moment, most people probably were pretty okay with the Thursday night, Friday night footy because we had already seen those teams play last week. Most of us have already made up our mind as far as whether we were going to Williams, whether we were going Heaney, Jordan. Those decisions were made. And now at this point, and if you're like me, you find yourself on a Saturday morning going, okay, now we're getting into trying to figure out some of the teams that we haven't seen yet. What's the blend of that team look like? Which rookies I'm looking at going. So I wanted to kind of give you a little bit of an update on my team, my thoughts particularly. Now, there's a couple of scenarios that I am looking at doing. So I'm just going to go over rookies, particularly the ones I'm kind of thinking about and interested in, and where my head's at as far as possible scenarios to fix possibly a Gibus. And if you're not really happy with the Grundy, there's a couple of things that I am sort of looking at the moment, and I want to unpack those a little bit for you. So first of all, Gibus is the injury. Obviously, got injured on 19, ACL confirmed. He is done. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm kind of tempted by Marty Hoare from Melbourne. When you look at Bowie got done with his AC out for like 8 weeks, which is a pretty big AC injury. So that's a big period of time. He's the most natural fit to come into that side. Named at halfback as well, so it's a really friendly role, which means I think he could score quite well. The other consideration is he did score pretty well when he was an AFL player in his first year, getting around the 80 mark, I think, for some games. But now he's mature. He got dropped. He came back in. They've picked him up. There's an injury. He's first into that slot. And it also says that Salem's on the interchange. Now, he's the big concern for me, but I think his job security is pretty good, especially if Melbourne win. I think they still want to keep Salem as that floating sort of role between the mid as well as maybe in defense if they need to. But I'm really interested to see how that works. Now, I would love to go with Howes, Caulfield, Hoare, and Reed. But then the issue is I'm really thin in defense for this week, and I don't know if I really want to be playing one of those extra defender rookies over, say, like a McKercher or over, say, Sexton, because that could, cost you points on field. So it's in this weird sort of situation. Yesterday, I did consider possibly starting Dacos in the midfield, so that way I could trade him out and then look at Carroll, who scored extremely well for Carlton. Carroll's one I am watching to possibly bring in. Scored extremely well as a sub, came on and got like over 50 Supercoach in half a footy. And then this week did extremely well as well for Carlton and looked really good. Did get some CBAs, looked like he wasn't out of his element. So Carroll got 74 Supercoach. My concern with Carroll, though, is if the news comes out during the bye and Walsh is delayed. I'm like, okay, so then there could definitely be a spot. The big one for me, though, is Elijah Hollins. So served his suspension after the bye. He should come back into that team. And he, for me, is probably the one that they're going to throw into that mix over Carroll, which then means he played well and I'm sure they want to keep him. But then that's the sub concern again for me, possibly. So that's where I'm waiting to see where that kind of mix lies up. Now, if you've got Gibus, you could always leave out a Caulfield, leave out a Hoare, leave out a Reed, leave out one of those players and then wait and see and make that correction trade when it hits the bubble. So that's the part I was considering. The other part I'm considering is now going, well, if I have a Yo and Carroll does fire off and is named with Hewitt, then I could always throw Yo into defense. So I'm pretty comfortable with Hoare. I think that's going to be my correction trade. I think that job is his, but he's the one that's kind of last come in. So I'm wondering whether I start him and not Caulfield because I'm a little worried about Caulfield. But Dale's named, Baku Karmas is named, and Caulfield are on the field. So for me, Caulfield's heavily owned, so I don't really want to risk it by not starting him. I had this weird sensation last night. Well, that sounded really weird. I had this weird feeling to fade Dacos. And it was about 10 minutes before the game. He'd been in my season team all year. And I'm like, oh, Sydney's going to tag. Trying to listen to commentary. Sydney's going to tag. And as you can see, I had Short in my team. And then I was like, am I thinking this way to try and maybe make up for the fact that I started Short? I started Hewitt as well. Hewitt looked really good. Played well, looked good, just didn't score for Supercoach and gave away a pretty critical free. But I thought his role was excellent. So I'm going to hold on to him. They play North next, or at least I can watch him for another round and see where I'm at with that. But yeah, that's where I'm kind of thinking at with Hoare and defense and Gibus, that whole situation. The next one is So that way, if you do start like a Yo or you did start a Dacos in the mid, you can then use Gibus to possibly then switch out to a mid or a mid forward rookie, essentially. The other one I am looking at is so Grundy gave away like 7 frees. Like, talk about going complete 180, dominated against Gorn, and then came out and was average. So it's funny because if you watch my team podcast, I was thinking, hey, maybe I'll go Grundy and English. So I'll go English because I think he's going to be top 2, and then I'll go Grundy for value. And then that was the scenario, right? And then I could just go Grundy can go to Gorn, maybe, or figure out who that second ruck is. And then after last night with Grundy, now I'm like, okay, maybe I need to go with Gorn as value with Grundy and then hope to maybe upgrade Grundy to English at his buy. Because the one thing I do like about English is he's extremely consistent, whereas Gorn and Grundy both have high ceilings, but can also drop out the occasional stinker. Like we've seen it last year, end of last year, Gorn dropped a couple of lower scores, but then he goes 170, 200 and goes big. Grundy, the same. He can drop out a few smaller ones. I think he'll be better for the run. But the one thing I was impressed the most about was how well Sydney actually used the ball yesterday to use the width of the MCG, which I thought was sensational. And then they ran it back through the corridor. So they pushed it wide, and then they would use that width and then try and sort of come back through and then use that space, which I thought was extremely impressive. Their defensive pressure, they pushed back really hard as well. Any smaller ground, I think Grundy's going to dominate a lot more because there's probably going to be a few more stoppages, and I think he'll actually get into the game a bit more. Whereas the MCG, I don't know, maybe it's just the way that they had to play against Collingwood to really stretch them and really work back hard into defense. And then they just wanted to slingshot and go. I thought it was very impressive. So I'm not sure if it was just the MCG element with the way Sydney tried to play that game. But that's something I'm looking at. So now I've kind of gone back to Gorn for value and looking at maybe watching Grundy a bit more and then look to hopefully get English on a drop. I don't know if I'm that optimistic though, because English does play the Eagles in round 3. So I don't expect him to drop at the time that Grundy has the bye. So that's my consideration for that one. But Grundy got a 71. So here's the other train of thought I'm thinking now. And so I'm looking at maybe McKirch's in this point here, but I probably have to play him on field. So this is the tinkering I'm kind of doing. This is no way by means what you see on screen, my final side. I had Dawson in, I had Buku Kamas in, and I still had 150,000 to play for, which was possibly going to be English, right? Or a Harms or someone like that. But I could also then fit Wines and Yo in. And I'm like, okay, if they both go 100 compared to Dawson 120, Buku Kamas 60, 70, maybe at best, who knows? And then it kind of left some issues. So I want points on field, but I'm also worried about, Bevo, classic Bevo, maybe switching some of these players out. I do feel pretty confident, though, with Buku and Caulfield being named on field with Dale. That was my main concern. So I'm pretty happy with them to start. And I think you just have to start and watch and see and then adjust. But the issue is now I've got Livingstone. If you had Grundy on E, like I did, to possibly loophole a captain option, Livingstone in the ruck line here, if you're like me, now I'm starting to think and get a bit tricky because I'm like, okay, now if maybe I put Sexton as emergency in my forward line, right? If he goes really well, which he probably should, right? I could possibly then look to bring Livingstone into my forward line on field, right? And then put Jackson into my ruck line. So if Sexton comes out, and I was going to play Sexton on field anyway, right? But then I was like, well, Wilson plays tonight as well. So it could also be Wilson, but then, who would I be playing? So I'm thinking about putting McKircher on field, maybe putting a Sexton or a, what's his name again? Wilson as emergency. And if one of them goes, 90, 100, or if one of them goes big, right, then I could bring Livingstone into my forward line and then bring Jackson into the ruck. Now, I know Jackson's hit and miss, but again, he went 170 against Brisbane last week. He could be good enough. So I don't mind him. I don't mind starting him. I don't mind him through the initial part of the season, the first sort of 4 weeks. So I'm happy to use that trade if I need to get off him. I could then also see, when Darcy comes back, whether they play more 50-50 until, Darcy gets up and running properly. So that is the thing I am actually considering at this point, which I'm not adverse to starting Jackson. I don't think it's the best decision. But then based on Grundy's 70 factor, I'm like, wow, that could be nice to actually loop in and bring Jackson on, who will go more than 71 against Brisbane. So, yeah, I think it's definitely something worth considering. And it's something that just occurred to me this morning that I am exploring, but it will see how on a few other things turn. And the reason we can do it is because you have Yo, Wines, Butters, and these other people sort of starting tomorrow, including a lot of the Fremantle ones like Fife, etc. So Fife could go into the midfield, Jackson can come in the ruck line, like, Livingstone can come forward. There's a whole lot of different things in here. So that is something I'm considering. Cadman, I'll go through a couple of rookies. Cadman. So Cadman for me, right, when you look at the forwards, I know Burgess could be good. I know his role could be a little bit more secure now. So for Adelaide, Burgess, cheap, 123K. Tex Walker's sore, so he's not playing. If he stays out for a period of time, then that would be an easy lock in. But the good thing with Burgess is he has been backup ruck and stuff before for Gold Coast. So maybe they use him with Thorthorpe out. He could be backup ruck. He could be okay. But again, it's a last minute rookie consideration where, if Tex is back in, do they go with a different mix? Do they go with a different blend of forward line? Because if they'll already have Tex, they'll already have another sort of key forward. So do you really want three talls? It's going to be interesting. And I'm not sure if I'm sold on his job security long term. Just depends on how they play with those tools, I guess. So I'm probably passing on him. Cadman is one I'm probably looking at starting. And the reason mainly is because they play West Coast and North the next 2 weeks, right? West Coast have decent defenders, Barras, McGovern. So I'm hoping he'll probably be more mobile than them. So he might still score okay, hopefully get on the chain for a couple of cheapies. But then North don't have exactly the strongest back line. Now, the reason I'm saying that I wouldn't mind starting him is because after he plays this week, next week, they have their bye. And even if he is a correction, he's still going to have one price rise. So even if you do need to correct Cadman and he's not going to be the one and someone's absolutely firing and you need to go someone else, at least you probably would have made 20, 30, 40 grand, right? Off one, which means that at least you're going to get value for your correction, which is unlike any of these other rookies that you're probably going to be playing. So that's where I quite like the Cadman pick. If he goes big, then he spikes his score. He'll get to 200 pretty quickly with, 1 or 2 big scores in his cycle. Otherwise, it's an easy correction with making a little bit of cash. So that's why I quite like starting Cadman. That's where I keep coming back to. Backup ruck, I think you'll get stronger as it kind of goes through. And I'm still waiting for that breakout game for the number one forward from his draft year who's mobile, like a Jeremy Cameron. I'm still waiting for that breakout game. Job security is good, so I don't mind him anyway, but he could be a slow burn. I'm just hoping for that breakout game where he goes one big score, everything clicks, and then you can now look to cash in. Right? McKercher, interesting. So started half back. Sheasel named on the ball. So named half forward McKercher. I think you just have to start highly owned. People are tossing up between him and Harley Reid as far as who's going to average the most. So I think so highly owned. I've thought about fading him, but it would be remiss of me to fade someone that's so heavily owned just because of the hurt factor. So he is someone I'm looking at. I know a few people are looking to loop him. I don't really like a loophole option at the moment. If you were going to start a loophole option in the midfield, probably Cole from West Coast would be the one, just because I think he's close to playing anyway. So if you did have someone that absolutely fired and you want that points, otherwise, generally you just go for money, right? So rookies there, go for money on field is pretty much where we're at with that side of it. Outside that, Booker Kamas is someone I am looking at, 123K as well, named centre half back. Intercepting defender. We know that they're points. We know that they're gold. He's named on field, which is extremely promising, I believe. And I think they're trying to look to that new sort of future for the Dogs. And Dale did speak preseason about how he really liked Booker being back there, taking the intercepts and being a really good teammate in defense. So a few things do line up with that. And he's only 2% owned, which means that if people might need to correct to him, he's someone that if I could watch him for a couple of games, see how he scores, and then I could always go like Cadman to him, or if someone's not really firing, I can go that way. So he is one that I am sort of considering being flexible on. But yeah, matchups. He's centre half back on Van Rooyen, it looks like. But yeah, so there's a few considerations there. I don't think he's going to be the trade, so the sub candidate either. McNeil will probably come on for someone else, a different tall probably. Liam Jones is fullback, so I think that kind of all matches up, right? I think the Dogs needed that sort of tall Bukukamas as that spot. I think you're more flexible to sort of round off and then probably offload it to your Richards and your Dales coming past. So he'll probably get some intercepts with maybe some more handball link ups rather than kicking. We'll see how he goes. But I quite like starting him. The issue is that I'm stuck between this weird going for value and then I kind of keep reverting back to guns and rookies. So, like I said, before I had Wines and Yo into this current mix that I have now, Dawson, Buku Karmas were probably the ones there. And then I had Wilson into the midfield and I still at 130K, right? But then, yeah, it's just so hard. So you're trying to look at the difference between cash generation, points on field, but then having a few people to flip, which is the aggressive nature I was trying to talk about this preseason as far as how I wanted to play things. And I wanted to be quite aggressive with the style of play that I had. So that's where I think a Wines and a Yo can kind of come into it. I don't expect to keep them, but I think their ceiling is good enough that they'll end up getting to about 550K. Because all you need is, a couple of like a 120, 110, or a couple of good scores in a row, and then bang, you're away. Um, Injury risk is big for Yo, obviously, but he does provide cover for through those first 6 rounds. Um, yeah, so it's about playing the extra rookie and then correcting because I think there's quite a few good rookies that have shown up this year, which I was a little bit surprised about. I was a little bit worried. The concern if you go more value and you don't start as many of these rookies, who are you going to downgrade to? Right? And who's possibly a sub risk. So for me, I'm avoiding. Here's the rookies I am avoiding. Right. So I'm currently avoiding Phillips in defense. I like him, and I think he provides plenty of value. I'm watching him and Hall as to what I could possibly do with my side to maybe downgrade Gibus to one of them. So that's the consideration. I just need to see more. So he came into the system. He's been pretty impressive. I also want to see how the talk is over the next few weeks. Things might shift up a little bit. If Giath comes back in, they might play him tall and then move out Phillips. I'm hoping not, but he's kind of on the shorter term on injuries, I believe. So he's someone I'm not starting. So I'll bring up all these popular own ones. The one I'm not starting is Sharp for Fremantle. I know a few people have seen him named and are like, yes, that's really exciting. But for me, I don't know, Sharp, I just get this feeling he's a perennial in and out person, right? Has been. I know they like speed and they like the rest of it. However, right, Erasmus is sub, it looks like. So he's on the extended bench, right? Now, Erasmus has been notorious for being a sub. So Erasmus could easily make his way into the best 22, and then Sharp could be the sub that comes on for that run and dash and that flair to take the game on and add speed to a game if they need to. So Sharp screams sub to me. On top of that, Chapman's also kind of close to coming back, and he also plays wing. So for me, that's a couple of red flags, in my opinion, for Sharp, his role, and the job security. Right. So that's enough for me to kind of pass. So like Chapman is, if fit, probably best 22 or a sub candidate because he can go back, he can go wing, he can move all the things around, right? Um, and Sharp and Erasmus, I think, are replaceable. They're both good. They both got speed and dare, but then do you want to start Erasmus as some of that contested kind of fill some holes and then add your speed, or do you want to start with the speed and then try and add in some contested grunt? But yeah, Sharp's someone I am avoiding at this point because of those reasons. Just trying to bring up heavily owned. All right, now let's go for some other ones. Ownership. The other one is I'm looking at, and there's a few that I have considered this year. Mainly, so I'm starting Sanders, as you know. McCurch is in. Oh, by the way, Zach Williams, I thought was good. 47 at halftime. That's 2 weeks in a row he's done well. 47.50 at halftime and it hasn't converted. I think he'll get better for the run, right? So his time on ground will get it better. I think he will improve with that. So I think if he's someone you've got, you just hold him out. All right, let's go. Who am I avoiding? Avoiding Sheasel at the moment. I went short over Sheasel. Probably doesn't look great at this point. Sheasel, again, I can bring into my side as an upgrade if he continues to do well. If he looks like he's a must-have and he's 50% owned, I'd rather kind of wait and see on that. Probably should have gone with the heavily owned guy instead of the one that's under 10% or under 5% owned in short. But yeah, you got to pick those point of differences that you're back in. Windsor is someone I'm looking at fading, 40% owned at the moment. Again, he's a correction trade for me, right? So I'd rather start Berry, who's named on ball for Adelaide. The coach has said that he's an important part of our midfield mix. Laird has said that he will play some forward, but he doesn't expect too much forward. There's been other ones where Rankin gets the CBA, Rankin then starts CBA, Dusty Martin style pushes forward. And then you have Sam Berry that pushes up from half forward into the contest. So there's even a scope where Berry could get 35% forward time because he starts half forward flank and then runs into the contest, which means that as a forward mid, he could be someone that could average you 90 if he gets enough CBAs. So he's someone that I think is heavily valued, and I would rather correct from him than try and go up. So Windsor for me, I thought looked good, but I think he needs to hit the scoreboard in order to do well. If you do have him, they do play West Coast coming up, so he might get on the leash outside for some of those games and do well enough around his bye or after. No, I think they play West Coast after their bye, but there is a consideration there to start him. I'm just not starting him, right? So Sean Manor, I should learn how to say this guy's name. Probably going to be sub, I believe. So I'd probably avoid that, even though he's named to play. Keep an eye out because I had to remind a mate yesterday. They don't now tell you, oh, hey, here's our 4 players on the bench, and then we're going to announce our sub before the game. They are now doing it as here's our bench of 5. And then an hour before the game, this is our sub. And it's to avoid saying people are dropped, and then renamed, right? So they just list 5. So don't get caught out thinking someone's named when they can be sub on the extended bench, which kind of sucks for us, but you have to now watch an hour before a game to see if you have a sub, right? Zane Dersma is another one I'm fading. Now, half forward flank did do really impressive with some marks and with some goals in the preseason, but in the season proper, there'll be more pressure on the ball, scrappier kicks. I think he's good, but I don't know if he's going to be consistent enough in his role. We saw Filippo last year, half forward flank, etc., being able to, get a mark and all the rest of it. However, sometimes those games of 50 will come in or 60s, and then he'll probably be stuck around 220K for half the year. So I could be wrong. It could be more like a Rosie of past, like and Windsor. They remind me of Rosie, right? Mainly Windsor could be more of a Rosie type that actually makes you money, and the one that kind of people ignored. But even Bailey Smith, that same kind of role where they're expensive and you kind of pass on them because they're expensive, but then they come through with the goods. I think they're the 2 exceptions because they're both phenomenal players. But Windsor does kind of give me that feeling where I'm like, okay, he could work out, but I'm not sure if it's going to happen for him. So yeah, Nick Martin is one I'm fading at the moment with Parrish out. I want to see the defensive role. If he gets DPP come round 5, I might even fix that up. If Short doesn't look like he's going to be top sort of 6 to 8 and Martin looks essential, I might try and upgrade to Short to Martin when he gets defense, or I might even look to maybe move Short to a Stewart or someone later on. But that's the consideration. Shout out to all the Heaney lovers, by the way. Anyone that got on Heaney with me, shout out to you. Again, the role's there. And even if in 4 weeks' time the role changes, I think they play North and West Coast. So even as a forward, he's going to get off the leash. He mid-time and then resting forward, which is perfect because he's getting the CBAs. He's getting that role. They want him in that mix. Killed it, but then also resting forward and leading up and being aggressive and then resting deep forward is just going to add to his points. And we've seen it before with like players as well that just get that role. So I think it's going to be extremely beneficial. Lazaro is one I have had in. I'm looking at passing. The main reason for me is you kind of go, okay, Simpkins out. Lazaro, I think they do rate. He's a fairly high pick from a couple of years ago, and I think he's someone that could do well. But again, I'm waiting to kind of see it and for my hand to be forced. Mainly because when you have a look at the mix, he's named on the interchange, right? I'm just trying to see. Oh, there's no Phillips. Okay, so Phillips was the one I was considering and worried about, but she's all Lazaro Powell. No, okay, so there's no Phillips. Can't see him anywhere. Maybe I'm wrong. Phil. Okay, so maybe he's not too bad, right? He's someone I was looking at. Not even emergency. What's Phillips done? Okay, so he's someone that I could see coming in, but again, at least I see a couple games and I can always correct because I don't want to start too many. Like if McCutcheon looks horrible, I can trade him out. If Sanders doesn't do well or gets dropped or a sub, then I can kind of look to bring some of those other players in. And then if some of my mid prices fail, I can always go down, go up, and then adjust, right? So the reason I am looking at probably going and spreading out a few of those 400K guys is to possibly, get points on field and then upgrade them later, but also to be able to then I can just be flexible, correct, change if I need to, is pretty much what I'm looking at for that side of things. So, all right, who else have we got? So that's Lazaro. Watson is 16% owned. Look, I heard he's great. I heard he's a magician, but small forward, don't go there. Do not go there. So Pink could be a good option, but again, like key defense, someone I'd rather correct. I think there's better options. I think Hoare again, half forward, so half back. I think it's undervalued, and he could be someone that everyone really needs to bring in. I'm considering starting him because of his role, and the scoring potential in his role means that he will be a correction anyway. So that's where I'm considering bringing him in. But then, you know, Caulfield's also small defender, or, back pocket. So, and I don't really want to start 3 defenders back there, right? So the only way is if I get rid of Stewart, obviously, which possibly could happen, by the way. Houston, I'm still keen on, right? I keep going back to Houston. I keep saying it. Watch him fire off. Um, this was when I was going more guns and rookie style. So I had Stewart in, I had Dawson in, and I still had 130K. So there's still some stuff I could do here. Jackson could be the consideration. Um, Again, so Stewart might move to Houston to give me flexibility for tomorrow, and Jackson possibly. Houston, so I want to keep coming back to 11%. Crazy, crazy, crazy. Huswaite, probably sub, so don't go there. Or, yeah, in and out. I think emergency, actually. So don't go there. Harvey Thomas, small forward, possible, 10% owned. Look, if you need a rookie and he fits your price cycle, then definitely go for it. Harms is kind of in and out for me, and Lions. They're the other 2 considerations. Oh, and Bonner. So I'll go through these ones to round out the last part of it for consideration. Now, Harms, again, they have West Coast round 3. McRae's not in, so it could help him at the moment. Harms is on wing, right? So wing, not sure he's going to get the CBAs. I think Sanders impressing inside has probably hurt Harms getting some CBA time. If Sanders wasn't really ready, then it kind of would have helped him to get some more CBA mix early in the season. So then that means he's kind of, for me, he's like a half forward flank that might get a couple of CBAs or push wing. But then when McRae comes in, I think McRae will probably push wing. Harms will go more half forward. And then out of that mix, though, right? So you got like Libba, you got Trelaw, you got Bontempelli, Sanders going in, then McRae, and then maybe Harms. So I'm like, I think he's just far enough down the line that gives me a little bit concern as far as him and his scoring potential, because I don't think it's going to be as good as they were probably expecting. I think he's a great player. I think he'll probably go 70s and 80s, so he could still be very valuable. I do like him, but it's just a little bit of a worry as far as the ceiling at the moment, a little bit capped for me. Jared Lyons, I am a little bit worried about as well. So, as you can see, big Lions fan. I respect him. I like it. He was named, obviously, last week, but Robertson wasn't. McKenna comes in, which is great. So I think that's a great sort of value there. McKenna comes in, obviously, for Kitty Coleman. So we'll see what that mix looks like. Robertson's now in as well. Neil's out. So you don't really get much more information, unfortunately, about Lions. He also was sub a lot last year, and that could definitely be the case. If they like Robertson on field, bring Lions on as sub. Lohman, it's going to be interesting to see then, because he's also fighting for that spot. So I think they like Robertson. He re-signed to the Lions instead of getting interest from elsewhere. So I think they like his development. Lions is fairly slow in times, but good at contested ball, good at tackles. So I think the other part that really scares me then is, well, okay, maybe Lions is best 22 when it's matchup dependent. If you have a big player like a Cripps, then cool. They will throw Lions on, and they will put a big boy on a big boy, which will free up Dunkley to be more dynamic, which will then free up Neil to be more dynamic, right? If they're playing like a Port Adelaide, your Butters, your Rosies, your Wines, then they might just go, okay, well, we can take Wines, Dunkley towards him because the other 2 are more mobile, and we don't want to be slow in that midfield. So then you have your Rayners, your Baileys, Robertson kind of doing some of that CBA mix, and they're a little bit more flexible. So I think if they're playing like a Tom Green or a Cripps, where they just have like a really strong midfield, like a big, strong midfield group, where they're also worried about the extras. They're probably worried about Doherty, Hewitt, Chera. So they wanted to have that extra big body to then put other good players on other good players. So I think that's the other consideration, that Lions might be best 22 when it suits them, but then also be sub. And he's a great sub, which sucks, but that's why I'm probably not starting him. For me, that's a correction. Bonner as well, someone I have looked at there, all of their injuries and the rest of it, 284K. Like, yeah, I think he's got it. Sinclair not in, though, probably makes it hard for me to pick him. I know he still probably plays with Sinclair, but will he dominate and score when Sinclair's in? I'm not too sure, so I want to sort of wait and see on that one. And D'Ambrosio, look, if you want to go there, I think sure. If you need that price point in defensive line, I think that's definitely not a bad option. And the other one was, so Hall's only 8.2%. Sam Berry only 7.7%, by the way. So CBA, I'd be going there and then adjusting. Yes. And then the only other one I think was Butterick, 6.5% owned. So did well enough, got 91, I think, as a defender. Looks good, role looks good. Awkward price point. So he's someone, again, I'd rather kind of see. And then if he looks like his break even so low, he might have gone up one price rise. I can always then try and adjust from there. But that is it. Let me know if I've missed anything. I'll try and get up on this Premier as well. I've tried to figure out this style here so you can see me, you can see the team. Again, this is just my thoughts at the moment. I'm kind of probably going to readjust this a little bit today. If I am going with that mix in the middle there, and if I do get Jackson in, obviously Stewart's going to go. Yohan Wines could definitely go. I do like Dawson. Back your premiums in, right? So premiums are premiums. You either like them or you don't. I like Sarong. I'd like to get him, but I don't think I can afford him. Butters, I think, is someone I just have to start to see how he goes based on their draw and his ceiling. And I know he's an injury risk, but at least start an injury risk and trade rather than bring an injury risk in. Um, so yeah, like back him in. Tom Green's one I keep kind of flipping and going to as well. I hate their buy, but highly owned. And he could be a 120 plus guy this year. Like he showed glimpses of a breakout, but this could be a breakout, like a big breakout. So, and I think they're going to win a lot of games. So that's the one I kind of keep coming back to. My bench is deep enough. So I'm quite happy to play Clark, Roberts, whoever else for the week that he's away. And I think I'm going to still do okay. So that's where I think you can kind of afford to start a couple of these guys. That's why I started Hewitt because I'm like, well, I can take a Roberts and I can score a 70 or an 80 or loop some players in and cover him for a week. So yeah, it's not, and based off Hewitt's this week, it's not really gonna, cost me many points. So that's it for this week. As far as captains, I'm looking at probably Green into Bontempelli. I don't mind those looking at Gorn, etc. as well. I have thought about Butters as C, but it's a very risky C. Those who took Dacos will probably take a Dacos. I'm hoping for more than a 130 would be nice. So yeah, we'll see how we go. But that's it. That's 30 minutes. Let me know your considerations and I'll get this up on the line. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.